William, your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. Welcome to the College of Complexes, being held at Barbeck's Restaurant at 8949 Garland Road, Dallas, Texas. Gently embracing the east side of White Rock Lake. When I entered, I was greeted like coming home to Grandma's house, warm and friendly. When visiting the Barbeck's Restaurant, tell them you want your reservations for the next College of Complex class.
Well, welcome to the College of Complexes. This is our 231st meeting since we started in February of 2009. Actually, this started in Chicago in 1951 for the purpose of solving all the world's problems. They're still working at it. We put a speaker on every week, a different subject. We require a speaker to take a position on the issue, express a point of view. They must be for or against something, don't care what it is. We give them an hour to make a presentation. If they go over an hour, we cut them off. If anybody interrupts the speaker, remind the interrupter that we only listen to one fool at a time. That's one of our rules we enforce. And then we have questions and answers, not speeches. And then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everyone in this audience that wants to gets 5 minutes at the podium to respond to what the speaker said, for or against. Then the speaker gets the last word, gets a comment, and close the meeting. That's how it works. Anyway, before we put our speaker on, are there any announcements? Now's the time for announcements. If anybody has an announcement they want to make. Any announcements? I can't believe it. No announcements. Hey, Jim, do you have an announcement?
Yeah, is anyone here? Ooh, I did leave it loud. Anyone here for the first time tonight? Okay, great. Well, welcome to the group. I hope you find it an enjoyable session. Let me adjust this sound a bit. It's trying to ring, so I don't want boing, yoing, yoing, yoing in everyone's ear. But again, welcome to the group tonight. We're glad to have you here. Hope you enjoyed the meeting, the presentation, the fellowship between all of us who come from extremely diverse backgrounds. We're not a class down at the local club or church or anything of the sort. Very diverse, so it is enjoyable. If you're not a regular attender and you would like to know what goes on with the meeting, so you might find another subject that interests you, that you want to hear, Tom will pass around a section of blank paper when he gets a moment, and if you'll put your name and your email address on there, he'll put it into the computer so he can send you a meeting notice and let you know what's coming up. So I hope that'll make it helpful to all of you. I would also remind those of you who've not heard the sermon that the folks here at Barbeck's are very generous with us. They give us 3-hour possession of the meeting room here. They charge us no meeting room fee, which we appreciate. And in return, we promise we will come and we will order some food of some sort or another. Spend a few dollars at the table so we're not just freebies coming in and sitting on the curb, figuratively. And I'll appreciate it if you will follow through on that, because that helps justify our ability to have our existence here. There's a lot of places who will not do that, so we appreciate they're doing it. Second point I would make from a financial standpoint is we all come in at one time, mostly, within a short time frame. So it's not like the trickle effect of the restaurant, And our server and her assistant do a very good job of stepping up and getting our orders and getting them out to us and taking good care of us. Please be patient if you happen to get here at a moment when they have a little bit of a log jam and they can't take your order and have it as quick to you as going through the drive-thru at McDonald's. They can't quite do it that fast, but they do a very good job. We appreciate it. Please tip the server. If you get a skinny order, do a fat tip. So because they're the ones that are really doing the work for us, and she treats us nice, and we really appreciate the service we get. I think someone's getting a little round of applause. Da, 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 da. Good for her. I have really nothing else to add to the program. Tom's been able to get a couple of food items down. And does anyone else have any meetings or anything they need to announce tonight? Because you're welcome to do that. So come on up, Tom, and get our speaker introduced, and we'll get the show on the road. We'll try to run until a few minutes before 9 o'clock, and they go home at 9 o'clock, so we do our best when we stop to evacuate and get everything picked up so they can bus it up and be ready for the crack of dawn Sunday morning breakfast. Thanks again for coming tonight. Hope you enjoy the meeting.
Okay, next week we have our speaker sitting right here. It's John Beasley, English-born author, retired from a long career with Xerox. He's going to talk about the reward of supply-side economics. It's on your itinerary there. I don't want to read it all to you. And following week is, 2 weeks, July 12th, we're addressing the wealth gap with Jim Love. That's also on the itinerary in the back. And Lloyd Chappelle will be talking about a lesson from the fall of the Roman Empire. Those are things coming up that may interest you. But our speaker tonight is Alison Henley. She's going to talk about how astrology is the connection between us and the greater universe. She's the president-elect of C.G. Jung Society of North Young. Where's my German? Young. I get shot to pieces here. Anyway, president-elect of the C.G. Jung Society of North Texas, former adjunct professor of English at adjunct professor of English at Richland College, recently retired from 30 years career in human resource management, part-time practicing astrology over the last 10 years and studying depth psychology since 1993. We'll discuss and argue that based on personal experience, she has found astrology to be a useful tool for understanding oneself. It helps clarify current evolutionary challenges of our species. It further is the art of finding order, purpose, and meaning within the apparent chaos of life events, and is a practical and mystical discipline. She will explain how your birth map is a roadmap of evolution that can illuminate personal archetypes, relationship patterns, and life purpose. Alison will show how astrology is the connection between us and the greater universe, and will discuss how it can be helpful as a tool to understanding our deeper self and our current cycle of development we are facing. She will also discuss the present cycle we are experiencing as a species and how we're being challenged to make dramatic changes on both the personal and collective evolutionary level. So without further ado, please a very, very warm welcome to Alison Henley, our speaker tonight. You got the floor.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Can everybody hear me okay? This sound is good? I think I forgot to turn mine off. Hopefully it won't. If it rings on me, I can't complain. I want to thank Tom for inviting me, and I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I'm excited to share with you my ideas and thoughts and experience with astrology. Just to kind of a little background about me, I'm a fairly traditional, practical person. I'm even an Aggie. I went to Texas A&M University. Hope nobody holds that against me, but I'm not a flake. I've worked in business for 30 years. I've been a manager for 20 years and held very responsible positions. So for me to get into astrology, how did that happen? I was forced into it. I was one of those people that could never really settle down and just be content. working and being married, I've always had an urge to learn what's going on behind everything. I've always had a desire to, seek out information on a deeper level. So I've attended a number of different spiritual schools of study, and I was in a seminary program in Chicago. I know some of you are from Chicago. And we were required to study meditation and yoga and the Eastern Hindu, Buddhist religions. But we also had to study astrology. And I was like, astrology? Because I just thought about the sun sign columns in the paper, and I thought, that's really goofy, And one of the other students and one of the teachers had PhDs in science, and they said, no, it's really, really reliable and it's very helpful. So that kind of opened it up to me. So like many things in my life, sometimes the best opportunities that have happened to me came to me by accident. And so astrology is also a lot about synchronicity and potential and all of that stuff. What I'm going to talk about tonight, I'm going to start with the historical connection of humanity to the sky. And then I'm going to talk about the natal astrological chart. I'm going to show you my chart, which, I kind of thought about showing you John Lennon's chart, somebody else. And then I thought, what? I can talk much more personally about my own chart. So I'm going to share that with you. And we'll have some fun with sun signs and archetypes. And then I'm going to talk about the current astrological cycle that's very significant that we've been undergoing since 2012. There's a very significant pattern going on in the universe. So first of all, let me just talk about the history of humanity's connection to the cosmos and the sky. Technology has had a profound effect on the way we live, and as we all know, it's resulted in the loss of contact with the natural world. Because of light pollution, we forget that we live in this wonderful galaxy of stars and planets, and we go outside, and you can see the moon, and I go out and look at the moon frequently. But we forget that we're living in a universe, a mysterious universe. Several years ago, I was camping in Big Bend, and at that time, I had a boyfriend that was an astronomer, and we had a 25-inch telescope, and we were camping out, and I'll never forget, I got up in the middle of the night to go to the restroom, and I stepped out of the tent, and I looked up, and I could not believe the sky. It's just fabulous what's up there, and it's such a shame that we can't see it. So, we've just lost that connection. But we have to remind ourselves, that we're on a planet that's traveling through space. We forget that because everything seems stable, but it's really not. Consider the fact that an asteroid hit in Russia, or a meteor, in February 2013. So, the things that are happening in the sky, we oftentimes kind of ignore. Astrology and the planets remind us that everything's continually moving, it's constantly changing. Our limited consciousness tends to create lifestyles that are comfortable, predictable, and secure. But that's not really the purpose of life or evolution. For most of human history, the sky was relevant, alive, and present in people's lives. There was order in the sky. In 6th century Babylon, an astrologer would also have been an astronomer and a very highly regarded person. When I used to go to the astronomy meetings here in Dallas, they would make jokes about astrologers, so I just never told them, much about it. That was always their joke. So, with the scientific age, astrology and astronomy separated. At any rate, people throughout the world have always managed to find order and patterns in the stars and in the constellations, and we can trace the origins of astrology back to the beginning of civilization. Ancient sailors navigated by the stars. You know, we forget they didn't have all that equipment. They traveled on the high seas according to the stars because they were dependable. Early hunters relied on signals in the sky for their survival and sustenance. And farmers, the seasonal arrival and departure of seasonal constellations told when to plant and when to harvest. So humans have, you know, historically, and I always believe it's in our DNA, have had a close relationship with the sky until recently. Earth-based peoples often would design their homes around patterns in the sky. And of course we have Stonehenge, and we have various buildings that were built so that certain light pattern would come in at certain times of the year, like at the solstice. The birthplace of the oldest form of Western astrology is Mesopotamia, 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. And the Egyptians also studied the sky. In fact, all cultures have a zodiac. There's Eastern Indian astrology as well as Chinese astrology, and I'm not going to get into that. I've had enough trouble just learning Western astrology. It's very complex. It takes quite a while to learn it. So why did astrology evolve as a way to find order in our world? Because no other aspect of nature is more precisely predictable than the courses taken by the sun, moon, planets, and stars. You can depend on the sky. And of course, I always think about ancient people being outside when they didn't have electricity. You know, what are you going to do? You're going to be sitting around outside probably, telling stories, looking up at the sky. And I can imagine that astrology was developed by them noticing that when certain planets were in a particular position, certain things were happening. Or people born at a certain time of the year had certain shared characteristics. I'd like to say that astrology is not fortune telling. A lot of people, and I think the Bible makes references, you know, to throwing those fortune tellers out of the temple. I do think the wise men were astrologers, and they were following a sky pattern on their way to find the Christ child. So they are in there in a fairly dignified role, but they did get thrown out as fortune tellers. And you know, it is not really fortune telling. You're looking at symbols and you're trying to possibly suggest potential events. Now I do readings, and I always have women that want to know when they're going to meet somebody. We all want to know that. When am I going to meet my great love? Or when am I going to get rich? You know, everybody wants to know that. And a friend of mine, I did her chart, and I said, well, you're going to meet somebody. I said, okay, all right, I'll look at it, you know, if you've got to know that. I told her all this wise, I thought very helpful, conscious raising information, but she wanted to know when is she going to meet somebody. So I said, well, it's going to be in April. There's a potential. I looked at a Venus planet, and I said, there's potential for you to meet somebody in Venus, even in April. So I work with her. She's a manager where I used to work. And so April came and went, and she came in to talk with me, and she said, hey, I met somebody. And of course, I told her, I said, you can't sit in your house. You know, yeah, the potential's there, but you have to also make it happen. We have free will. So at any rate, she said that she did meet somebody, but she said he's 20 years younger than her. And I said, well, look, I just told you when you're going to meet somebody. I can't guarantee the age. So at any rate, you know, you can have fun with it in that sense, but you got to put yourself out there. I said, you know, you have potential to meet somebody, but if you're sitting in your house all the time, I said, you got to either be out and about meeting people, or you need to be online dating. Since 1993, I think astrology has helped me to understand my inner landscape and my soul, in addition to the current cycles happening for me as an individual, as well as the greater collective. Carl Jung says that we're born with an original blueprint of shape patterns and archetypes. Another phrase for archetype is instinctual psychological processes. Archetypal has a feeling tone, and emotion is an information system. So consequently, there is a value in understanding your inner archetypes. This helps us identify opportunities that might be appropriate for us, because we're all conditioned. I have some handouts that I probably ought to get. Tom, can I bug you to pass these around? And go ahead and get these out so that you'll have that information. To create the study of the natal horoscope is what you use to cast a birth chart. And to create a natal horoscope, you need to know your exact time of birth, your date of birth, and the exact location. So that's the information that you need to cast a horoscope. Because I think it's really not very helpful to understand your birth chart, because pretty much all of us have been conditioned. There's a lot of cultural conditioning that we grow up with. The collective operates primarily on fear. So most of us were conditioned by our family of origin and the culture to become obedient, to comply, and frequently to repress different parts of our personality that don't fit into the conventional model. So astrology can give you some insights into your unique nature. It always helps confirm things that people have thought about themselves. Frequently they'll say, I thought I was crazy, and I'm like, no, this is who you are, and that can be affirming. It can also, once you identify these archetypes that are your archetypes, it can help you choose a unique path for your individual expression and help with the process of individuation. It can also, and this is what's been the most helpful to me, it can identify conflicting archetypes that you might have in your chart. Because, if you don't know that, you can think you're nuts, because you're like, well, I want security, but then I want to be free, So it's very helpful. So an astrologer takes your birth data and creates a horoscope consisting of a wheel. So what it looks like, and I think, does everybody have a handout? No. Do we need some more? Okay, I've got some more.
Good. Oh, good.
Wait a minute, I think I gave you the originals there. So a horoscope, the last page of the handout is what a horoscope looks like. It's a wheel. So if you want to look at that last page, you'll see what a horoscope looks like. It's going to look like a wheel. And it's got 12 houses, and they're numbered. Now I've kind of drawn on this one because I'm going to point out some things, and I wanted you to be able to follow me. But if you look at that inner wheel, it's numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. It goes on around to 12. I know this can be kind of confusing when you first look at one. But an astrologer takes your birth data. Now I have a computer program, and this is where technology is great, because I just plug in your birth information, and the computer spits out a chart for me. Now in the old days, I would have to rectify a chart myself, and given that I'm not that good with science, that would probably take me a long time. So I'm very grateful for my software. So we've got 12 houses, which represent departments of life. You've got 10 planets, and the planets are listed at the bottom right-hand side of the page. You've got the moon, sun, Mercury, and so on. And the planets represent the archetypes, or the urges. So again, you can see that sun sign astrology is fairly limited. Just knowing your sun is just one archetype. It's an important one, but it's just one. Additionally, I think everybody's familiar with the 12 signs of the zodiac. So your planets are in different signs, and this describes how your archetype will express itself. So to me, it's one of the best personality assessments, around. It beats the heck out of the Myers-Briggs or anything else because it's so complex, and it's based on the planets. And then in addition to looking at the houses and the planets and the signs, then we look at the aspects, or how the planets are interacting with one another. You know, some of your planets or some of your archetypes are harmoniously aligned. Some may be fighting. Some may just be ignored. So, you know, it's almost as if inside of us, and Carl Jung also believed this, there's not just one you. There are many energies inside of you. It's almost like a committee. You know, I used to think I was schizophrenic or something, you know, because I had these different archetypes. And I think that's why astrology has appealed to me. It's helped me identify these different interpersonalities and learn how to better communicate and manage and interact with them. So at any rate, you know, you can see just offhand that it's a fairly complex situation. Now, most all of you are familiar with your sun sign, so I thought it might be kind of fun to have, you know, a little bit of talk about that. So if you'll turn to the first page of the handout, we'll go through the signs and talk about the healthy evolutionary expression of the sun signs. And for all of the archetypes, there's generally going to be a healthy expression, a higher level, more evolved expression, and then there'll be the shadow expression, the less healthy. And so this is also good to keep in mind because we all have tendencies and we can all go south. I know I can, pretty easy, you know. It's very easy for me to go south. How many Aries? Do we have any Aries in the room? Aha, all right, Aries. I figured there'd be some around. Aries is ruled by Mars. Aries is the warrior, the pioneer, the survivor. They're courageous. Now, sometimes people say, you know, I'm not like that at all. And I say, but that's what you're supposed to be evolving into. You know, that is your personal expression of your power this lifetime. The shadow expression in Aries is a bully, defensive. I worked for an Aries person that was just ugly, just awful, you know. Everything was a fight. And I did her chart, and I said, you know, not everything has to be a fight. Had to be careful. She was my boss. So at any rate, yeah, how many Tauruses? Any Tauruses? Okay. Taurus is ruled by Venus. Taurus is generally concerned with security. It's the earthy one, practical, sometimes silent. Sometimes they don't talk a lot. The shadow expression of Taurus is that they can get stagnant or too materialistic. And Taurus is ruled by Venus. Again, I'm just mentioning a few archetypes. These may not be the only ones. How about Geminis? I bet there's some Geminis here. Aha, yeah, they like data. Geminis like to learn. Gemini is the teacher, the storyteller, the journalist. The shadow expression is busyness and superficiality. So, what about Cancers? Do we have any Cancers in the room? They're all home in bed. No Cancers. How funny. See, Cancer is the mother, the healer, the nurturer. And they love home. Cancers, my moon is in Cancer, and boy, did it not want to come and do this talk tonight. It's like, what are we doing? And I know one of my colleagues here is shaking her head because her moon is in Cancer too. So at any rate, the shadow expression of Cancer would be smothering and risk averse. They're not going to go here and talk on astrology at Barbeck's on Saturday night. How about Leos? Any Leos here? No, not one Leo. Well, they're out performing somewhere. Leo is the performer, the child, or the clown. Their shadow expression can be arrogance or pride. Virgo is my sun sign. Any other Virgos here? I figured there'd be a few. Some Virgos, exactly. Virgo is the servant, the discriminating one. The shadow expression, which God, have I ever had to deal with it. Critical and perfectionistic. And Virgos are so hard on themselves. I mean, we're critical of other people, but can be very hard on ourselves. So we have to learn to accept ourselves. And so Virgos, again, need to learn to be, it's not about being perfect, it's about being discriminating. So I kind of play the higher evolutionary word in my mind to help me. Any Libras? Oh, we got a Libra there. All right. Any other? We got a Libra over there. And one back there. Libra is the peacemaker, the artist, and the lover. It's ruled by Venus. Libras can also be superficial because they don't want to offend anybody. And I have 3 planets in Libra, so I can be a people pleaser sometimes. And I always notice when I'm like, oh, I'm doing it again. Stop it, you know. So Libras can be superficial and indecisive. I had a good friend that was a Libra. We'd go in and sit down at a restaurant. We'd be 10 minutes through the meal, and she'd go, do you think we should have sat at that other table over there? And I'm like, shut up, you know. It has already been decided. But they kind of always worry about their decisions. Now, Scorpio is one of my favorite signs. How many Scorpios? Ah, okay. Scorpio is one of that sign goes the deepest. And it's associated with death and regeneration. Scorpio is the detective, the sorcerer, the hypnotist. The shadow side can be moody, obsessive, and brooding. Do we have any Sagittariuses? I bet we do. Yeah, I figured we'd have some Sagittariuses. All right. My Mars is in Sagittarius, and that's the one that made me come here and do the talk. So I'm glad I have some fellow Sagittarians here. That's the gypsy, the student, and the philosopher. So those are great archetypes. And now the shadow expression of Sagittarius, which I have to watch, is they can be opinionated and have bad judgment. And I can feel myself working up an opinion sometimes about stuff I don't even know anything. And I'm like, you're doing it, you know, your Sagittarius, Mars is kicked in, you know. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't even know anything about this. Maybe I need to get some data. And then how about Capricorns? We got a Cap. All right, we got some Capricorns here. Of course, lectures on a Saturday night would appeal to a Capricorn. The Capricorn can be a hermit. It's the father, paternal figure, the strategist. They're ambitious. I always like to hire Capricorns when I was in human resources. You know, they usually make great employees, you know, hard workers. Yeah, absolutely. The downside, sometimes, and I have dated some controlling. they like to be in control because they need that control for security. They can sometimes be a little unfeeling, and sometimes they can be lonely. So that's the downside of Capricorn. How about Aquarius? Got any Aquarians here tonight? Not any Aquarians. That's funny. They're the revolutionaries, the scientists, and the geniuses. But they can also be alienated, aloof, and cold. And any Pisces? All right. I figured we'd have some Pisces here. Pisces are the mystics, the dreamers, and the poets. Astrologers frequently say that Pisces has the hardest time on the physical earth plane. They'd rather be out in the ethers, you know, they're not sure what they're doing here. Some of the downside of Pisces is addictions and wanting to escape. And if you have a lot of Neptune in your chart, which I do, you know, there can be a tendency to want to, when I was in high school, you know, drugs and alcohol were appealing. I had to find a spiritual path, and of course astrology has helped, but I had to find because you need to be inspired. And our culture, to me, is not particularly inspiring. It's boring and, you know, it's crazy. So, you know, we can't help it. We either need a drink or a spiritual path. Okay, so those are the signs. So I thought that would be kind of fun to see what you all are. As far as the planets, those represent urges. and archetypes. So the sun is the urge to express self and identity. So your sun sign, which you all know, is how you need to express yourself this lifetime. Now the moon talks about what you need to feel and be happy. It's the urge to feel, and it's your emotional style. And I think I mentioned earlier, my moon is in Cancer, and it would rather be home tonight and not up here speaking. So my moon. But the rest of me was like, oh, we're going, you're coming along, you know. Mercury is the urge to learn, your communication style. Venus is the urge to relate, your partnering style. That gives you some information about how you like, what kind of relationship, you know, you might want to be in. If you have Venus in Scorpio, you're going to have intensity and depth. If you have Venus in Virgo, you're going to want somebody that's very neat and clean, you know. The sign is going to affect how your planet expresses. Mars is the urge to assert oneself in the world. My Mars is in Sagittarius, that's why I'm here. Mars was like, get out there and do the talk. We're going, you know, you'll have fun. It's also your sex drive. And so one thing that's, I think, is always kind of fun with astrology, not everybody has the same sex drive, you know, and of course, the strongest sex drive in the zodiac is Mars in Scorpio. That would be the strongest one. The second strongest one is Mars in Sagittarius. Mars in Leo. So at any rate, you know, Mars, frequently science tries to say we're all the same, and astrology says, no, we are all different. And it's important to know that, particularly if you're doing relationship compatibility. You know, astrology can be very helpful to understand that your partner is just not like you, and particularly that Mars area, you know, but in some other areas as well with the moon. Jupiter is the urge to grow and expand your personal philosophy. Saturn is where we need to discipline ourselves, create some structure. It's about learning a lesson, self-sufficiency. And again, I'm just throwing out some terms. I could say a lot more about all of these planets. Uranus is our inner disturber and where we kind of go crazy. That's the fun one. I've got a lot of Uranian energy in my chart. Neptune, yeah. Inner disturber. Sure, let me, okay. I have my Venus, which is, you know, my relationship planet, is in a not a harmonious aspect with Uranus, my inner disturber. And normally when we see that in a chart, we know that person is not going to stay married probably if they run into a lot of issues. They're going to leave. So it's disruptive. It's where you might want to be a little different and where you want to express your individuality. I have Uranus in the 11th house of groups and organizations. And I was always that HR manager, that person in the organization that was causing some problems because I would have to say what I saw and, you know, would be myself, individualistic. Does that kind of help?
Yes, I understand it.
Okay.
It's a 90-degree problem.
It's a 90-degree problem. But yeah, Uranus is where you're a little different. You're not going to go with the pack. It's where you're going to express your individuality.
Astrology is ruled by Uranus.
Yes, it is.
Because of the change factor.
Right.
Uranians don't mind change.
Right, exactly. She said astrology is actually ruled by Uranus because, right, yeah. Right. Neptune is the urge to find inspiration, it's God consciousness, and then Pluto is the urge to realize your destiny, the urge for truth, depth, regeneration, and transformation. And then I just list out the houses. The first house is identity and personality, the second is values and money, the third is logical mind and siblings, the fourth is home, family, and deep self. And these are the departments of life where the energy is going to manifest for you this lifetime. The 5th house is love affairs, creativity, and children. The 6th house is work and health. The 7th house is marriage and partnerships. I always note that marriage and love are in 2 different departments of life. The 8th house is sex, joint income, inheritance, and death. The 9th house is travel, law, philosophy, higher learning. The 10th house is going to represent your career, your public standing. The 11th house is friends, organizations, hopes, and dreams. And then the 12th house is the unconscious, the spiritual realm. It's also the house of hidden enemies. So you can see that, there's a lot of information in an astrology chart. So I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about some of the things going on in my chart and how I think astrology has helped me. If you look at my chart now, you'll notice that in the 1st house I have the sun as well as Mercury. A 1st house sun indicates somebody that has leadership qualities, and it was very early on in my career I became a manager. So I think that has played out, and there's a part of me that likes to express that. In the 2nd house, I've got 3 planets in Libra, and that's where my people-pleasing can sometimes manifest. And my Venus is in Libra, so that would make me somewhat of a people-pleaser. I don't like conflict. So, that's where some of that people-pleasing comes in. I've also got, just checking out my time here, in the 4th house, I've got Mars in Sagittarius. And Mars in the 4th house indicates somebody that is interested in looking at things very deeply, understanding myself. So there's no wonder that the Jungian studies and astrology has been particularly productive for me. I have a conflicting Mars and my Mercury are not in harmony. So sometimes this can make me somewhat defensive and opinionated. Sometimes I can come out talking too much. I know in my relationship with my boyfriend, I'm always thinking, I'm talking to him. I'm just talking at him constantly, So I have to kind of manage that and also make sure that I'm not too blunt, particularly in the workplace when you're speaking with bosses and people that, could get upset with you. I have to make sure that I'm not too direct and too blunt. And so when I was saying that it's nice to know about these archetypes, for years I thought, well, am I a people pleaser or am I blunt? Because I would get feedback that I was both those things. Well, I am both those things. And so it's helpful to identify these energies that are within you, and then you can manage them when you start feeling yourself falling into one of those patterns that may not be healthy. We can also see another one of my issues. I've got the moon in the 11th house, and it's disconnected from the rest of my chart. So that's the Cancer part of me that the rest of my chart is fed up with frequently. But I have to honor that. I have to remember that I need time at home. I need quiet time. I need to take care of myself or I'll get tired and I'll get cranky. So, you need to honor all of these energies, even if you're not connected with them. Yes? Okay. And then in the 9th house, I've got Jupiter, which means that, I love to learn, I like to travel, but not too much because Cancer, doesn't like a lot of activity. A little bit of activity goes a long way. And when I travel, I can't run home from work, pack, and run, and catch a plane. I have to have transition. I can't just do that too quickly. And then another area that's kind of interesting about astrology is the North Node tells you a little bit about your life purpose. And I know that's always something of interest to a lot of people. My North Node is in the 6th house of service, and it's in Aquarius, so that tells me that I need to be doing something that's kind of cutting edge or different. Certainly the astrology has been part of meeting that need. But I've also worked in organizations, and that's allowed me to express the nurturing of my moon and also express my North Node soul purpose. So I just wanted to share a little bit about that with you tonight from my personal experience, so you could see how astrology, I think, has helped me manage myself a little bit better. What I also wanted to share with you, and I think we're doing okay on time, right? I wanted to talk about the current astrological weather forecast that we're currently experiencing. Not only is astrology useful for understanding ourselves and our inner world, but it's also helpful to discover the current cycles that are impacting all of us at this time on planet Earth. And there's one cycle that astrologers have been studying and talking about for years, and that is the Pluto-Uranus square that began in 2012 and it ends in late 2015. So if you've noticed that things are kind of stressful and there's a lot of things changing rapidly, you're probably noting that we're under this planetary cycle. In early 2014, we entered the heart of the transformational process of this Pluto-Uranus square as the two planets aligned in a grand cross configuration with Jupiter and Mars. And so what we have here, and this is happening globally, and it's happening on an individual level, these are intense, exciting, and unstable times. We're all being pressured to evolve on both an individual and a collective level. And so there can be a lot of pressure. I was noticing Mars just went direct. The planets sometimes retrograde, or it appears that they retrograde from our place on Earth. And Mars just went direct, which is kind of kicking up this already, this Pluto-Uranus square. And I think it's created some of the conflict that we're seeing. This powder keg in Iraq has just erupted. So I was noticing that kind of corresponds to the archetypes and Mars turning direct. Pluto is Lord of the underworld. Just to talk about, we're really talking about symbols. And so you never know exactly how symbols will play out with external events. But Pluto is the Lord of the underworld. It would be your personal ability to rise from the ashes like the phoenix. Uranus is your internal disturber.
What is meant by underworld?
The underworld, okay. That would be the unconscious. That would be things that are below the surface, that are not conscious or not public. Covert, it could be in your personal life, it could be things that are unconscious, that you're not aware of. It's out of awareness. Uranus is your internal disturber, so it's colliding with Pluto. Uranus is never satisfied with the status quo and is a universal force for instant and radical change, and can result in deep restlessness and curiosity. So some key words for Uranus would be inventive, radical, contrary, and breakthrough. So what we have here are these, Pluto. Pluto can also represent institutions. It can represent structures, the status quo. So we've got kind of the status quo colliding with innovation. Pluto can also represent corporations, and Uranus can represent we the people. So we see these forces colliding. Uranus and Pluto conjuncted back in the 60s when we saw a lot of social unrest and a lot of political changes. So now, though, I think a square might be a little tougher than the conjunction. Although the conjunction was difficult, the square is actually opposing forces. You know, we see the government, the political parties opposing one another. Now, one thing that you might consider for yourself personally and also for the collective is that during this particular time, 2012 to 2015, anything that doesn't have a good foundation will be challenged to either transform or it may end. It might get overthrown. It may end. So a good foundation needs to be solid, flexible, and built to last. So what are you building on? If you're in a situation that is not healthy, if it's faulty, you won't have a healthy situation no matter how long you stay in it and try to make it work. And this applies to, it can apply to relationships, it can apply to health, it can apply to jobs. It was kind of interesting, back in 2013, I noticed that our friend Uranus, the disturber, was going to hit Jupiter was going to hit my natal Uranus, and when it did, I lost my job. But I kind of could see that coming, because I knew that when Jupiter, which expands things, hit my natal Uranus, I was going to want to break free. And I had always struggled with the people that I worked for in that job. So when it happened, I think this is another benefit of astrology. I thought, you know, I really need to be gone. So I really do need to be out of here, you know. So when I lost my position, I knew that there was something internal in me almost that had created it. So that's where synchronicity between the inner and the outer can come into play. And now I'm interviewing for another opportunity, so things will probably work out better for me, you know. So it's nice to know that. It takes a little bit of the chaos out of your life. So we've got an unsettled atmosphere, we've got erratic weather patterns, we've got earthquakes, stormy intensity on emotional levels. I think we're all noting that there continues to be a destabilizing factor with a lot of things in our lives. You know, with the economy has been shaky. You know, the government is shaky. So we see this continual disintegration of things that just aren't sustainable. Now the ego seeks comfort, security, and predictability. And most of us don't like change. However, the purpose of life is to evolve. We're not meant to be in a rut and stay there. But we tend to want to go to the comfortable and safe places. So if you're always doing what you've always done, you'll only get what you've always had. So the question for you is, have I broken free of the conditioned routine? Have I moved through the trauma of chaos and let go of the conditioned thoughts and belief patterns and moved into my personal journey of individuation? And I gave you a handout that talks a little bit about some questions you can ask yourself. The two words that I like to use that kind of simplify these energies are breakdown or breakthrough. Wherever things aren't working, there's going to be a breakdown, or you can evolve it or transform it. So the two key words for this cycle might be breakdown or breakthrough. So there's 4 areas that you want to look at in your personal life. The first one is your self-identity. Where are you feeling stifled? And what new energies might need to be expressed? You know, as humans, we tend to get stuck in a rut and we're doing the same things over and over again. So where do you need to be more courageous and move into a new area of self-expression? We all have an inner jailer, you know, that fear that holds us back. So where are you being held prisoner? How can you take action and jump in with vigor and thrust? So Uranus represents an area where we are forced to develop and defend our individuality. And if you fail Uranus's test, you'll feel like a bit player in somebody else's movie. Uranus teaches courage because we must mate our desires and our actions. It's the power of the will to make a life. So this can feel very stressful. If you're in a role that's not working, where you have to, you know, suppress yourself or change who you are to make somebody else feel comfortable, then you got a Uranus Aries problem. Also, relationships are up for review right now. How are you collaborating with others? We all need to practice self-assertiveness to be in harmony with other people without giving up our own identity. So that's another issue. Are your partnerships healthy, or are they based on unhealthy needs for security, comfort, and predictability? What needs to either transform or end? There's a lot of relationships breaking up right now. Some of the people on the Jung board are marriage and family therapists, and they tell me they're quite busy. Things are very busy. Business is very good. And then we've got Jupiter in Cancer, so we need to look at our home life. Do you have a safe and peaceful home life where you can retreat from the stresses of the world? That's very important right now. With the stress that we're all under, to have some peaceful home retreat. Is your home in need of repair? Are you ignoring things there? Again, it's not good to ignore things under this energy because they're just going to get worse. The problems are not going to go away by, I don't want to think about that. Believe me, I know. Do you have a sense of family, community, a support group? They say a lot of people nowadays are disconnected. I guess we're connected, but we've never felt more disconnected. So you need to create a secure emotional base with other people. That will definitely help you through these times. And you need to be in touch with your feelings. I think modern people tend to kind of live in our heads. Sometimes we're not in touch with our feeling nature. So this is a time when you need to kind of be feeling your way through things. What feels right? Pay attention to your body. If your stomach's bothering you, that's one of my clues that something's wrong. If I'm in a relationship or I'm in a job and I start getting nauseous, then that's a big clue that there's something not right. So your feelings are in your body. You need to pay attention to that. And then work with Pluto and Capricorn. We're all trying to live within the institutions, the social structures that exist. Is your job allowing you to express your unique gifts? Are you in a healthy situation, or is it negative? And also your health. Your basic health is your structure, your Plutonian structure. And I know a lot of people living in their heads kind of forget about their bodies. So we need to make sure that we're eating correctly and exercising, sleeping, all that stuff. So that's what you need to look at on an individual level. As far as the collective, I think we continue to see areas where we're out of balance. We see unsustainable structures. We see the gluttony of corporations. That's a problem. Corporations are running everything. They're kind of out of control. They're running Congress, as my friend Tom says. I worked for the federal government. The government is way too big. It's not sustainable. It's ineffective. It's inefficient. It needs to be streamlined. We're not doing anything about that. It just kind of continues. We're in debt. So, we've got these aren't good foundations. Something is going to happen. And I think you've got a speaker talking about the uneven distribution of wealth. That's coming up, I think, in July. So that's another area where we're out of balance. When I worked for companies, I was always kind of curious. I said, well, if you lay everybody off, you're not going to have as many customers. Never made sense to me, but they continue to do that. We have polarized political parties that are not willing to negotiate. There's just blaming going on, and again, that's not a healthy structure. And I don't know how we're going to get out of that. We've got violence through much of the world, and of course, violence on a personal level. As a Jungian, we're all violent. We're violent to ourselves. We're violent to one another. We hate somebody because they don't think like us. So we have to be aware. Sometimes we think, violence is over in Iraq or something, but it's actually within us. It's our shadow. Then we've got, this separation versus collaboration and unity. The human species is reaching a point where we're going to have to learn to work together. We can't continue to be fighting one another, or we're not going to make it. So that's another aspect of this energy that needs to transform. We need to be more creative. And then technology, I think, is managing us. I don't know how how did everybody get convinced to walk around with cell phones? I'm like, wow, the whole world, we get technology again, I think, is in control. We're not managing it. And it's getting out of control. I think they're going to start putting chips into babies' brains, in 10 years.
That's 21st century, though.
Yeah. Right, it is uranium.
We'll accept it, and it's okay, and then we'll go to Star Trek.
I guess so, but I don't like the idea of somebody putting a chip in my brain.
I don't want it either.
And when I was teaching, I shared articles with my students about that, and I said, you guys better watch out. They're going to be controlling you through that chip. Then we have the longevity. People are living so long now, and yet, companies think that when you hit 60, you need to retire. Well, with people living to be 80, 90, 100, that's not sustainable. Social Security for all those years, it's crazy. And that just continues, and there's no plan that I know of to really deal with it. And then we need to merge our head and our heart. We can't just be living in our heads all the time. So it seems that our linear world that we've created cannot resolve the problems that we currently face as a species. So we're going to have to somehow get creative and find new solutions and be willing to make some changes to some of these structures that are either going to break down or need to be transformed. At any rate, in summary, I've discussed how ancient people were connected to the sky, how astrology can be a helpful tool to better understand yourself on a deeper level, and then I've talked about the current astrological weather pattern. So, any questions that you have? I think you had a question?
It's on. Looking at your chart,
Yes.
3, 5, 7, 8, and 10 are blank. What is that significant?
Well, that means that, the third house is the house of the everyday mind. The fifth house is love affairs, creativity, and children. I have no children. So the fifth house, if there's not a planet in a house, it means that there's probably not going to be a lot of activity in that house this lifetime. It's not a focus of my energy. The seventh house is the house of marriage. I never did real well with that. But if you had a planet in the seventh house, you would probably be married, and you would find fulfillment in marriage. Does that answer that question? So the houses that don't have planets are just not that significant. My first house has the sun and the Mercury there, and I know I was dating one man, and he said, "You're too much into your identity," and I said, "I am, because that's the first house. I'm focused on my identity. I'm not going to give that up for marriage."
Understood. My second question would be, do you do private readings? And if so, can you share with us what your chart is?
Sure. I do private consultations. I charge $100 for an hour consultation, and you get a written report as well as a recording.
Thank you.
You had a question?
Yes, I did. I've been doing astrology for a long time too, and excellent lecture, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
What I wanted to, can y'all hear me?
No.
Okay. I've been doing astrology quite a long time too, and I wanted you to talk talk not about transits per se, but the fact that we're in an important one that's getting a lot of coverage on the internet, even for people who don't know astrology, and that's Mercury retrograde. It's so useful to know what to look for. It's this month, guys. It's going on till the 1st of July, I believe.
Right. Yeah, we are in a Mercury.
Yeah, 3 times a year it's in Cancer.
We are in a Mercury retrograde, and I kind of have a different attitude about it. I know a lot of astrologers warn about car accidents and don't buy anything, and but during Mercury retrograde periods, which do happen 3 times a year, right now we've got one going through Cancer, Gemini. Generally, it's a time to kind of think about being watchful of details. Just the RE words: review, reevaluate, revisit. Sometimes during a Mercury retrograde period, some people from the past might come out of the closet. You might hear from somebody in your past. I think it's a good time, a particularly good time, to be open to insights and to review your life and think about where you want to go. It's a very good time to reflect and meditate.
I just wanted to share just from, I've been tracking it, I guess, maybe for 10
Let
years.
me hear that.
Yeah, I can talk up. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you need the mic.
All right, I'm sorry. I just wanted to just give you kind of a thumbnail, sketch 4 or 5 things. I've been tracking Mercury retrograde, like they said, it was 3 times a year. And some things that will be really useful and have proved over time. That's why I'm into astrology, is if you study it carefully, you'll see how helpful it is. One thing is that if you travel or if you have electrical equipment, electronics, you may have some erraticness with them. The same with travel, you may have a delay. If you've got a contract coming up, it would probably be better to wait until the retrograde period is over. That would be after the 1st of July for this one. But at the very least, really scrutinize it for loopholes. Anyway, those are just some practical things.
One of my favorite astrologers, Stephen Forrest, also says that stuff can go wrong, though, even when Mercury is not retrograde. So we don't want to get paranoid about it, but all of those are good suggestions. Yeah, be more careful.
Yeah.
Be more careful. I did sign a lease one time during a Mercury retrograde period, and the property went into litigation. So, I get what you're saying. It is, but the place was run down. That was probably not a good decision. Okay.
Timing is perfect.
Well, you can talk on the phone with the microphone.
Being that this is a question and answer period, I have 2 short questions.
Okay.
The first one, given basically the complexity of this science, and given all of the conflicting things in society today that you have outlined, and giving the prominent moon position in your chart, do you find yourselves on full moon nights out howling at the moon?
Absolutely. I was out there Thursday night. Absolutely. I'm definitely a lunar person. Yeah.
Secondly, as I have been learning over the years, I would say virtually all of the leadership, particularly that behind the scenes that pull the strings, are very occult in their orientation. So do you think it is possible that a lot of them are not just happening to fall into these charts, but are pursuing them because of what is laid out and because of their occult beliefs?
I think that's a possibility, definitely. I haven't read anything. Well, I know that Reagan used astrology quite regularly. Reagan and his wife both consulted an astrologer regularly. So I think it's very likely. I mean, we're being controlled by the global elite, and I'm sure that they're using. I mean, it would be very easy to take astrology and manipulate people. I think they manipulate with fear anyway. So, given that we're in these kind of unstable times, I think it's quite possible. Because if you can keep everybody scared, you can keep them compliant. You know. Any other questions?
Yes, right here, over here. You haven't mentioned anything about the ages. I know that we've been transitioning from Pisces into Aquarius.
Yes.
Can you
Sure.
elaborate on that?
Yes, we are, you know, and we are ending the age of Pisces and entering the age of Aquarius. And I think that the Aquarian age, we can tell that it's already upon us with technology. That would be one aspect of Aquarius, because it's ruled by Uranus, and Uranus rules technology. So we see technology really taking off and accelerating. The other kind of energy that's Aquarian is the need to cooperate. Aquarius is concerned with the good of all, and so that's the good side of Aquarius. It's that energy that wants everyone to have a home. Everyone needs to have a job. You know, that's the good Aquarian. You know, you want the greater good. It's not just about me anymore. It opposes Leo, which is all about me. Aquarius wants, you know, peace and harmony, and for everyone to have a slice of the pie. So Aquarius, you know, we need to move into a more Aquarian way of dealing with one another. Now the downside of Aquarius is that you can get lost in the group, because Aquarius is all about becoming a group. We are seeing the global world, you know, the global culture develop, and so it's easy to lose your individuality in the Aquarian age. So those are just a few comments about the age of Aquarius.
And when will we finally arrive?
You know, I didn't bring that exact year with me, and it's never really clear, because you don't just, one day it's Pisces and the next day, you know, it happens over a period of 2,000 years. So we're just beginning to move into it. It's dawning. That's right, in the old Hair musical and song. But it's an exciting time. It's an innovative time. There's great opportunity, but there's some dangers.
I'm curious about the when you say Uranus is so key to astrology. Why is that? Is it its position, or where it is?
Because it's an air sign. It rules technology. It rules innovation. It rules anything that has to do with expansion and consciousness. It's the inner disturber. Uranus, the archetype of Uranus is, and your question was about astrology?
Well, you said it rules astrology, not just that it rules those things. So I wondered why, if I heard right, I guess.
Yeah.
And if so, well, I never thought of it as it's not a planet we talk about.
Right, because we can't see it with the naked eye, and it was recently discovered.
Well, okay, so maybe that's part of my question. Astrology is old, but
right.
Uranus is...
Some of the outer planets were not discovered until we had telescopes. You know, originally in the ancient times, the planets stopped with Saturn, because that's all they could see with the naked eye. And then with the advent of the telescope, the first planet that was discovered was Uranus. So that's why it rules, probably why it rules technology, is because it, you know, hey, we have a telescope, now we can see it. Then they discovered Neptune and Pluto. So the ancients didn't have all those three outer planets. But, you know, some of the astrological theory is that as our consciousness expands and we identify these planets, then that gives other archetypes that we can grow into. And there may be additional ones.
I've got another question unless somebody else does.
Hello.
Thank you.
What do you think about astronomy?
Astronomy?
Yes.
I think astronomy is great. I'm very interested in astronomy. I used to belong to the North Texas Astronomical Association and always enjoyed the meetings. I like to learn about the planets because I'm interested in the cosmos. I think it's very fascinating to get out, and observe the planets through a telescope. And it's amazing that you're looking back through time when you look at those planets.
Do you realize that according to astronomy, your chart is 2,000 years out of date? It's all wrong.
Right. I know. That came up, I think, back in 2011. And Western astrologers are basing the planetary constellations that we use to construct a chart based on the equinoxes. So pretty much everybody just kind of blew that off in the astrological world. I'm not really equipped to talk about it scientifically.
You got an astronomer here, an astrologer or something.
You might. Do you want to address that?
Here, give her the deal.
I'm not an astronomer either.
Right.
I know.
It comes up occasionally.
This is a standard question that I get from skeptics, and it's a fair question. Okay, here is the difference. What he is talking about as scientific astronomy is called sidereal astrology. Okay, but we don't use that to interpret charts. We use what was before the age of Copernicus and Galileo. Those people, when they discovered that the Earth is not the center of our solar system, that the sun is. But this is the funny thing. It makes no sense, but I'll try to explain it. My brother is a psychologist, and I got him interested in studying charts for a couple of years. And so he was able to explain it scientifically. He said, first of all, you skeptics are absolutely right. It has no theoretical validity, which means there is no obvious reason why the way that you look at the sky it's called geocentric rather than sidereal. There's no theoretical reason that's obvious why this should work. But he said if you actually study charts over time with these qualities that are assigned names of planets, he said it has empirical validity, which means it is borne out in experience. It's very helpful. It's good for psychological typology, what we're talking about. Also, for people who are interested in the historical side of it, I studied Judaism, and in the medieval period, the Jewish rabbis, many of them, used it for exactly the same reason Alison and other modern astrologers do, to help assess people's character for various reasons. As long as it is not used for fortune telling, it's not really prohibited in the Bible. And one thing about you were talking about the leaders, I'm almost finished, I'm sorry, is that this was done historically. The rulers, for example, the Chaldeans in Mesopotamia, they lived by the stars. That was their god, the sun and the moon and the stars. And that's why the Bible said, don't be like them. Rely on the divine will rather than the stars. That's idolatry.
Now, I did make a note to address your question because I knew that would come up. Apparently, the stars, this is what astrologers say in response to that question. The shift in where the stars appear to be has no bearing on the tropical zodiac system, and that's what's typically used for horoscopes in the West, and it's based on segments of the sky calculated using the equinoxes on Earth. So, but I do know that came up, and thank you for your comments on that.
I hope that makes sense.
I have a little bit of help, maybe, for the skeptics, which is because I've been a skeptic. Okay.
And that's good. You should be.
Yeah, and so the way I know Alison is more through the Jung Society, and I was we talk a lot about archetypes in Jung and myths. And so when we look back at, say, Greek mythology, we don't believe in those gods, but we learn from them. And we can learn about human nature from the gods that are ancient gods. And we learn about human nature from the fact that there's religions through all cultures all over the world. And that is how it was explained to me by a Jungian, that because it's more that it's the common experience of mankind. So that's why when the astrologers say this was figured out a long time ago, it's more of a human imprint on the planet than the other way around, if you can think of it that way. And that's where you may find some insight. It's more of a study of human nature than anything else, if that helps. And I don't even know if Alison would agree with me, but.
No, I think that's a good way to look at it. I think that, for me, I've experienced it to be valid. But I don't know that you can prove it scientifically. You can certainly, there's correlations can be made. But the people everybody I've done a reading for has always said, I've never had anybody say, oh, this is not like me at all. I mean, it just seems to work. So for me, I experienced it, and it felt real. So I don't know that, being a fairly analytical, logical person, I don't know that we can prove it like we would like to. It is both a science based on the planets, but it's also an art. But it seems to resonate with, I think you would agree, it seems to resonate. You do somebody's chart, and they're like, wow, how did you know all of that about me?
Without you were Virgo, you have 3 planets too, so
Yeah.
that made it easier.
Right.
Yes. Do you believe that astrology is an absolute indicator, or is it really a self-fulfilling prophecy? I mean, if so many people believe it, then it comes true. It's rather like in the stock market. You have a thing called you have a thing called the relative strength indicator,
Yeah.
which actually calculates the momentum of the market.
Right.
So do you think this is absolute, or do you think it's governed by what people as a herd believe it to be?
Maybe a little bit of both. I don't like to think, I think you could, I don't know that you have to believe in astrology. I think you can be a conscious, evolving person without it. I think it's a great tool. I think that I would probably argue that it's not just, that people do believe in it, so we think it's real. Because I've experienced information for myself that I don't think I would have had. It gives you a language with which to talk about yourself and your energies, but I don't know that it's absolute, in the sense that it doesn't determine who we are. People could live very productively without it. I just have found it to be personally very rewarding.
Margaret's got a question.
Okay, we recognize that the day and the day and the minute and the place where one was born is a great significance. What about the day, the time, and the place when one was conceived? Does that have anything to do with anything?
Well, it's funny that you brought that up. We don't use that. Traditionally in astrology, we use the exact date of birth. Now it gets a little, there is some controversy about people who are, when labor is induced, but again, you have to draw the line somewhere. So pretty much you just stick with, the time of birth. I haven't read anything. There's so much data that you're dealing with already in a birth chart that, if you had another chart to deal with, it might be overwhelming. Yeah. But that's an interesting question, you know. Sometimes you can people can pinpoint when they're going to get pregnant, you know. You can look at potential for pregnancy.
High probability.
Right, right.
Somebody was back there, but I had.
We got a question over here.
Yeah.
Yes, do you find, or have you looked at all, any relationship between astrology and numerology? And I ask that because I have two acquaintances, who one is one is the other, and they have been getting together and comparing notes and finding it very fascinating.
I don't, but I know quite a few astrologers that do. Have you done any work with that?
I'm a numerologist.
Are you a numerologist? You might have some ideas about that.
You know, it's just,
Watch the video because they can't hear her.
yeah. If you want to get a bird's eye view of your life, actually numerology is the first thing to do. The reason being is it's divided into fewer sections, and it will tell you some interesting things. You may or may not want to accept the metaphysical, premises that it is built on. But most people that I've ever done a reading for say, this is me. It's like my fingerprint, that sort of thing, and it's a little more accessible. Mm-hmm. So it's just a differently laid out system, but it has certain departments of life, just like astrology does, that sort of thing.
Now, what is it based on? Is it your birth
It is
date?
based on two things. One is it's based on your name at birth, on your birth certificate. Okay, so any changes like your married name will have kind of tinged the whole view, but it's that. And the other thing is your date of birth, that sort of thing. But it will tell you things. It has things that are like transits. In other words, how your planets from your chart evolve over time. But it has it in its own system that way.
Okay.
And the thing that really is the most useful, and to me that's what makes it valuable, is you can't prove it, but if you study it and through experience you see it helps analyze. To me, I tend to suffer from sensory overload in new situations, but if I can pick up things that I know, see themes in people and situations, that helps me order what I see. Right. You see what I'm saying? It distills down.
No, thank you. I tend to like to stick with astrology versus some of the other forms of divination because I think it just always has seemed so accurate. I guess being a Virgo maybe and being analytical and practical, I like at least that it's based on the stars. But I do know that a lot of people are correlating with that.
So what is it about the planets that have some sort of control? Is it gravitational pull?
Well, like the moon, affects the tides. It's just the fact that we're connected. It's the way that we're connected to the universe.
So you would say gravity?
Gravity, or just the fact that, they're out there impacting us. The sun impacts the earth. It impacts plants. So I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say that the planets would affect us. Even if we can't, you go out in the sun and you're absorbing vitamin D, but you don't really know that. So in that sense, the planets do affect us.
Hello, I've seen things on the internet. It said that Obama is the devil and Obama is the Jesus. What does astrology say?
He's a Leo.
I mean Barry Soetoro.
I don't really have a lot of information about his chart. I don't think they have his exact birth time, which makes it difficult to cast it. But I don't think he's the devil or Satan or anything. Well, He's got, I think he's, you know, if you'll notice, I think he's got some Aquarian energy as well. Yeah, he's kind of disconnected from the common people. He has a little bit of a difficult time, I think, connecting. He's very intellectual, and I think it's hard for him to kind of come to talk to the, you know, it's hard for him to make the connection on a heart-to-heart basis with people. I think he suffers from being over-intellectual. You know, he's smart, but it's hard to connect to the common person in the population with his astrological configurations. Makes him seem a little cold and aloof.
Has anyone come up with a correlation between astrology and the reading of tea leaves?
Not that I know of. But some astrologers do both, you know. It's not unusual for an astrologer to do a divination card reading. I don't do it, but a lot of astrologers do like to use tarot cards, tea leaves. I think she uses numerology. I've always found that just the planetary, there's so much information, I've always found that just the chart, if you can hone in on the major issues, that's the most helpful. Because otherwise you can be dealing with a lot of data and people can get overwhelmed. Oh, I do? Okay.
Oh, you got a question back there?
Can you use astrology to tell about past lives?
Yes, you can.
How they influence us?
You can. You can. That's another area of astrology. That, in fact, I talked a little bit about life purpose, and that's the North Node. You can look at your South Node to see what your past life might have been. Since I'm supposed to be out in service during this lifetime, that tells me that in a past life, if you believe in it, I might have been in a monastery studying metaphysics, you know, and there's a tendency, I have a tendency to want to hide out, go to the mountains, not be involved in the community at large. So you can look at it like that. Also, I think it's your moon sign can indicate what gender you were in a prior life. So there's a whole area of astrology that can look at that. I don't specialize in it. You know, this is all complex stuff, and but I do know that is a whole area that you can study, as well as relationship compatibility. I guess I've already had so many past lives in my current one. I'm like, I don't know if I can deal with any past lives.
Alison?
Uh-huh.
If anybody who's interested, go to microphone. Yeah. Anybody who's interested in knowing their past life chart of reading, it's computerized, but it's quite good. Go to astrology.com, look through, they have a jillion different kinds of readings, and there's one that's based on information from Edgar Cayce when he was alive. And it's really interesting. Of course, you can't prove anything about that, but you will see some similarities between what you might have been doing back then and what you're doing now. It's just, it kind of adds an interesting twist. It's only about $20 if you're interested.
Okay, now it's your turn to talk. So who wants to be first? Come on up here. You have 5 minutes.
Well, I enjoyed that very much. You didn't go into a lot of the history of astrology, like the United States actually hired an astrologer during World War II, you know. You're familiar with that. The Germans were winning the war, and we found this out and hired an astrologer to figure out what they were doing, and so we could counteract. And if you don't believe that, you can I'm not sure what book it would be in. I've read so many books on astrology. But of course, Grant Louie was a Harvard professor who set out to disprove astrology, as you know, and became an astrologer and has written a couple great books on the subject. One puts the sun and the moon together and really helps you analyze yourself in a real easy way. You might want to pick up, what's it called, Heaven Can Wait? I like that one better than the other one. There's so many good books on astrology, gosh. And of course, years ago, Evangeline Adams was taken to court and actually proven to be correct using astrology and analyzing the judge's son, I think. It was a famous court case that she actually won. But astrology, even if you know the very basics, can be so valuable.
I was just going to point out the reason they did that was because Hitler believed in astrology.
Yeah, he was into the mystical, study of mystical things, right.
That's not true. It was in numerology. He did not believe in it.
He's what?
Hitler did not believe in it.
Is that right? I don't know, one or the other. Yeah, I'm sure you've read quite a bit about this subject. Yeah. He was into obtaining mystical objects, I know. So he was kind of, and I'm a graphologist, handwriting analyst, and I know his very, very heavy writing. He was had a very probably brilliant but warped mind. So along about the same line as maybe Jack the Ripper almost, maybe very heavy and muddy writing. But what else was I going to talk about? Astrology, just knowing the basics, where if you have the correct time and you know what house your sun is in, it gives you so much direction in life. Like your sun in the first and mine in the first. But I'm not absolutely sure about my time. So my sun might be in the 12th because I've always been interested in mysteries, and that house rules mysteries. And I was alone a great deal of the time growing up as a child. My father died when I was young, and so I was sort of left on my own from age 4 on. And I never got in trouble. I was always protected. I had an older brother who was 11 months older. But we lived this sort of mystical life in California and were taken care of by various strangers while my mother had to go to work. If your sun, say, is in the second house, you have a gift for making money. That's a valuable thing to know. If your sun's in the third house, that's the house of expression. And you have a gift of speaking. And you also have a very quick mind. You probably spoke at a very young age. I'm not sure about Einstein's chart. Are you? Do you know where his sun is in his chart? I can't remember. But I know he was a Pisces, a very mystical sign. And didn't he say imagination was more important than the thinking mind? Yeah. But the sun in the 4th, the natural ruler would be Cancer. So you'd have a very naturally nature-loving person, home-loving person, nurturing person, is what I was trying to say. And then, of course, the sun in the 5th is the house of fun and games. And you probably have some innate talent of some kind. I did a chart. I did charts for people. And I did a chart, and somebody was quizzing me about a person who had a lot of planets in the 5th house. And I said, oh, they probably are a great kidder. And it turned out it was a famous baseball player. And he had all this talent, but yet he had trouble being serious about life. He enjoyed kind of having fun all the time. And of course, the 6th house, if you use astrology to hire people, planets in the 6th, that house rules work. And so they would be a wonderful worker. As I have 4 children and I've watched their charts for years, and my daughter has the planet Saturn there, and she is such an organizer, my goodness. Everything is organized and in its place. And when she was a little girl, I took her to a friend's once and she alphabetized their books for them. She was about 5 years old, I think. But of course the sun in the 7th is the natural ruler would be Libra. And so you'd have a very gifted person in getting along with other people, peacemaker, and dealing with personnel would be great for them. And of course the 8th house, Scorpio, and it also rules inheritance. I noticed the Kennedys all have a really strong 8th house, a lot of inheritance, a lot of inherited money. The ninth house being the higher mind, planet people that are interested in religion, but they can be maybe a religious nut would have some negative aspects to that particular house. But you understand, astrology is just fascinating once you get into it.
Okay, who's next? It's got to be a next. Come on up here.
Thank you. He always says that. He don't say it to anybody else. You did? Oh, okay. I didn't hear it. Thank you. Wow, this is a really well attended, and that really depresses me. But you are so nice, and I guess what side I'm on. You already know. But you got all these astrologers. So 2 reasons I don't want to really be vicious, because I don't want to get killed, and you're all so nice. And I'm on camera. But yeah, I don't know what she means. She's always pointing at me. You overdo it. So what law of diminishing returns there? I started coming to this meeting because I was so interested in activist ideas and people that could think outside the box. And I thought rational thought and logic were so important to get what we needed to fight the status quo, which is not static, but it's the status quo being a predominance of evil and lies and secrecy and militarism. And here I am, and you're getting a better response than any serious subject I've seen. And I say that serious because everything you said is kind of fuzzy for me. In this time of life, I want to be an activist. We have a lot of activists here. And we need to be able to defend our positions before it becomes a violent, emotional thing with logic. And the stuff you're saying really seems to be, well, this other side's not me, but that side's me. And it's just too fuzzy for me. But the reason I'm not even more vicious, I did have a positive astrological experience. When I was 22 years old, I was just walking along in a strange place, and a stranger looked at me from about 100 yards or more and said, "I know your sun sign." Just shouted out my sun sign. It was a 17-year-old girl. I was 22, and she was right. So that's 1 chance in 12. She has to guess. What's your sign? You didn't raise your hand either. I want them to start guessing signs, all these professional astrologers. She did that, and so I can't go 100%, but I don't have a use for it myself. Scientifically, it is absurd beyond belief. All your rationalizations for it are ridiculous. Oh, yeah, they are. I mean, you're just reading stuff. You don't know. It makes no sense at all. Absolutely. But we can talk about that later. Anyway, I just hope that we have this much passion for things that we can do step by step to counteract the unfairness, because that's the only path I see. Thank you.
Well, I really didn't think I was going to have anything to say. But Hank has stimulated that. Pardon? Oh, he's an Aries. Oh, my God. Well, I have of course, as some of you may know, a very radical viewpoint about what this experience is that we're having. I think that all of human experience is an illusion, and that it's projected from consciousness, and the projector is our own consciousness, and what we hold as our thoughts and our beliefs is what we create for our future. So I think that astrology can be very important in human consciousness because it's there and so broadly accepted. Then there are going to be results coming from it, even just based on that. Interestingly, And I think I mentioned this once before. Albert Einstein used to live up in Princeton, New Jersey. And I have a friend here in Dallas, an older lady whose family lived next door to them. And when she was a teenager, she and he would sit out in the yard on lounge chairs on nice summer nights and look up at the galaxy and talk about it. And one night he said, "Now, Sadie, you see that star up there?" And he got her to look at one particular star and then started talking about the people who lived there, the civilization, the planets around it, and all these details and on and on and on. And pretty soon she turned to him and she said, "Dr. Einstein, it sounds to me like that's where you're from." And he just looked at her and smiled. Now, I have a question here. How does astrology work from people who are in a totally different solar system? All the alignment of all of the stars is completely different.
They have a different chart.
Yeah. I would say that it's a pretty infinite subject.
Okay, who's next? Not you? All right. We're going to have you next or next. Someone else can come up here. I'm not going to be the last man standing. It's only 8:20. Yeah. Have we got another? Is there anyone else? Oh, she's going to come up and defend something. All right.
Well, if anybody cares, the royal family uses astrology, and they are very concerned about that. But the whole country of India is founded on astrology. I don't know if you know that. And also Greenwich time is founded on astrology. There's a whole different aspect that deals with health, which is very, very accurate, dealing with your health. It's absolutely amazing. And I've known people in the medical field that rely on astrology. There's a whole group of people also that use astrology for the stock market. And they're very accurate. I think they're probably very intuitive, though.
Well, I'm waiting for the next person to get up here. Jim, are you going to come up here? John, all right.
Well, the first thing to say is get my name right next week, but yes, I've naturally, like everyone else, been aware of numerology and astrology and astronomy. The strange thing is that the more you go into astrophysics, the more weird the world becomes. I mean, to the extent where it's almost totally unbelievable. For example, the latest, the notion that has been around in physics the last 10-15 years is this notion of the expansion of the universe, which was, they can't explain the way the universe is other than the fact that after the Big Bang, the universe suddenly went whoosh, using accelerations unknown to man, actually. But they actually, the current scientists, including Hawkins, actually agree with this. So there's a lot of strange things going on in this world, and it may well be that astrology is one of them. It could. I don't. But the strangest thing, really, to me, is human behavior. Actually, there was a book called The Madness of Crowds, and when you see human behavior en masse, you realize that we're living in an age, we always have done, of lunatics. It seems that lunacy overwhelms everything. It certainly seems to overwhelm common sense. What's going on in Iraq right now is total lunacy. And what America was ever doing there is beyond lunacy. And the fact that they should be involved in the Middle East at all is total lunacy, or any other damn place. I just go along in my life being amazed at the lunacy of this world. And yes, you see all this lunacy, and we hope there will be rational behavior and rational thinking. But I'm sorry to say there's not much of it about, especially in, with our politicians. They seem to be totally irrational.
Okay, isn't it great that this man pointed out that this is one of the best attended of these meetings? And I think that's your answer. It's not that people don't care about being activists. It's that, and I came because Alison is a nice person, as you were pointing out. And she's one of my favorite new acquaintances in this past year. So I was like, yeah, I'm going. And also I wanted to learn more about why it's important to some people. So it's a combination of what you said, which was that our experience is just filtered through our brains. It's mostly illusion after all. And you can't get people to vote or be excited, it turns out, about something that doesn't reach them, or that is not somehow put into a context that means a lot to human beings. So everybody's here and hoping to get some insight, and I got some. I learned something new, which was that the charts were, it makes sense that they don't need to know about, it can be 2,000 years old because the charts are 2,000 years old, and they're even pre-Copernicus because of the way we on this planet see them. That's what it is. That's just the takeaway. It's trying to understand human nature, and believe me, politicians do that. They know about the reptilian brain. They know what goes right to the fear. They know, believe me, people who sell soap, they know about human nature. And so this is informative of human nature, how we see the sky, how the elders, how the ancients see the sky.
The precedent has already been made. 2 comments. Mr. Beasley, you brought up a subject, and I have a viewpoint on it. I have a very unique degree in physics called a Bachelor of Arts in Physics, because here I was hell-bent to be an aeronautical engineer in a liberal arts school, and having my nose dipped like a kitten in different little batches of information, and began to branch out tremendously from there. So I didn't get a Bachelor of Science, I got a Bachelor of Arts. But I have some viewpoints. I think a lot of what we're taught in physics is just pure BS, if you want your Bachelor of Science. And one of them is the Big Bang Theory. I don't accept the Big Bang Theory at all. I'll tell you exactly why. It's completely dependent on the theory that space out there is empty, but it's not. It's densely filled with all kinds of energy, and we'll probably spend 1,000 years or more figuring out what all that is. To give you an example, we think of light as both a particle and a piece of energy, a wave, and it has both of those characteristics, but when it goes by a gravitational body, it's bent in its course, so it exhibits mass. Now, if space were completely empty, there would be no friction on that thing as it proceeds through those infinite, practically, amounts of distance. And with the Big Bang Theory, they look real far out there, and the farther they look, the more there's the Doppler shift towards the red in the color of light, which is the lower frequencies. The light waves are stretched out more. It's like when a train passes, it's a high tone, it passes you, it's a lower tone. Well, the farther out these are, the lower the tone is. And so they say, well, they were the ones that were blown out first in the explosion, so they're going faster than everything else. And it just comes back to here, and things that are very close don't show that Doppler effect. The planets and stars that are the farthest out, their light has the longest distance to come through space and interact with all the energy in space. And they are slowed down, and that is the apparent Doppler effect. And I am totally confident that someday in the future they're going to admit this. I think it's absolutely true. I don't think those planets are receding out from us at all. I don't believe there was a Big Bang, which is based again on the emptiness of space, as they say, which it is not. There is energy everywhere in space that is easily convertible to electricity. Nikola Tesla had proved that. Other people have proven that. This all gets stamped out. All of Tesla's works are still classified at Los Alamos, although he gave the world the first electrical power plant at Niagara Falls. I mean, brilliant man. More patents than anybody else. No one else has 5 patent numbers in a row in his name. He was able to take his little briefcase-sized thing and plug it into his car that was electric and drive it around without any fuel, because he had developed a circuit that would draw in that energy. Space is filled with energy. People who fly from different star systems to this one, they don't take fuel with them, because there's all the energy in the world they need in the universe everywhere. And if you will go to an organization called SERPO, or a website, serpo.org, and read about that, you will see that in the sources of information from that are very, very interesting. It came from CIA personnel. It was eventually, the sources ended, so the whole story didn't get out. But we have technology beyond the imagination. And one of the fellows who was the head of the Skunk Works, I forget his name right now, you can read about him in that site, stated after he had retired at a speech he was giving at a college that the United States government has the technology today, and this was years ago, to fly to the stars. But he said it would take an act of God to get it released for the benefit of the public. I have no doubts that we've been all over this solar system, secret projects have, and that probably to nearby stars. I wouldn't doubt that at all. I have absolutely no doubts that plenty of other people out there, human and non-human, have been and are here now. And I, as a matter of fact, was having dinner one time with a friend from the NSA, and he said, well, Albert, you know there are 3 levels of government. And I said, well, I think I've already been told that. And the first is the politicians, and they both said, you know, we think we elect these people, we don't elect any of them, it's just all a manipulation to make it look like we have freedom of the vote. Second level is the intelligence community, that is one community basically worldwide, and the third is the very rich people. And I looked at him and I said, you know, I see things being done very consciously on this planet that are in the interest of no portion of humanity at all. They're destroying this planet for our living on it. And I said, because of that, I think there's a 4th level, and I think it's alien. And he, former NSA guy, he took a few more bites of food and thought, and looked up at me and said, you know, you may well be correct about that. And I had another friend that I met years ago. I talked to him a few days ago. He was a colonel in the Air Force, 22 years. He was stationed in NORAD headquarters in Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, top security clearance. And when I was probing, I've always thought out of the box. When I was probing his thinking, getting to know him, I suggested, you know, I've heard there may be aliens in our government. And he looked at me very seriously and he said, you better believe it. There are people in our government today who look just like us, and they were not born on this planet. And he was dead serious about it. And I asked him about it about a week ago, and he said, yes, absolutely. Anyhow. By the way, I thought that was a great presentation, and what Hank said, even though we know Hank is crazy as hell. I love Hank, he's a great guy. But you have really entertained us tonight, and it's been a great subject.
I wanted to ask Alison.
Come on up.
No, I don't have anything to say.
All right. Any more anything? Come on up here.
This is more in the nature
nature of a question because I am definitely a skeptic on this subject. But I've come here with an open mind. What I'm wondering about in this is that, okay, so we have all these charts, and astrology's been around for centuries, and yet who, before we discovered these planets, for example, Uranus, who was the inner disturber? Or the same with Neptune and Pluto, or before any of these others were. How did that fit into the science of astrology, or the urge to find inspiration, God consciousness with Neptune? Where did that fit into the science? It's just a question that, since I am here with an open mind, and I would like to have the answer to that. Thank you.
Get it right up here first, then you get the answer. You get the last word. Oh, okay. So you'll get the last word. Try to remember to answer that one. Anyone else? You got another one?
My last job in England, I worked for ICL in the research lab, and I worked for a Dr. Hyman. Now, he was an extremely eccentric person. For example, we went up to Manchester, that was the home of computing, and the head professors were showing us all this research. In the middle of this, he began walking around the room, muttering to himself, and suddenly he woke up and he rushed across and he said, "What's this?" This piece of equipment. They said, "Oh, it's the advanced electronic sputtering system." And he said, John, this is wonderful. We must have one of these." Well, the most profound thing he ever said to me, he said, John, we're in the research, and he said, there's one thing that we must keep secret at all costs. He said, never divulge it. And that is, he said, the fact that we don't know anything.
Any other comments? Well, no, we're running out of time pretty soon, so that's why I was checking to see if there's anything left. I'm the last man standing, but I don't have much to say, except you did a great job tonight. What's that? Yeah, I know, of course, you get the last word here. We'll let you have the last word. But I really have nothing to say. I'm going to let you have the last word. Come on up here.
Okay, to answer your question about those outer planets that were just recently discovered, who was the inner disturber, the God consciousness, those are, in the theory of evolutionary astrology, whenever a new planet is discovered, that opens up a new opportunity for growth. I mean, that's the easiest and simplest answer that I can think of. Basically, I want to thank everybody, including you, for bringing up that he was acting like a true Aries. And, it's funny, when I talked about giving the presentation, I said, I'm just going to argue that I've had a good experience with astrology, so it doesn't matter to me if you don't believe in it. And I certainly can sympathize with the fact that it could be upsetting to have a better turnout for astrology than maybe something that you think is more practical. See, Aries they like a lot of attention, But anyway, no, I appreciated your comment, and I think it's good to have healthy discussion. I don't believe everything I think. I saw a bumper sticker like that, but I just find astrology to have been very helpful to me personally. I thank all of you for being here. It's been a great opportunity for me, and it's been good to hear many of your diverse viewpoints and comments. So thank you very much.
Okay, we have to be out of here by 9 o'clock, just so you know. And so And then beyond that, we retire down to Starbucks at the corner, and our speaker is welcome to come down there and we'll buy our coffee. Yeah, it's a place to go after here. Sure, help yourself. Yeah. Anyway, come on down there if you want, and we'll continue the conversation. That's it. See you next week.
This is William, your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like us, or follow us, and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call. So when visiting the Barbeck's restaurant, tell them you want your reservation to the next College of Complex class.